We can't find him anymore. I give up. John just looked at me and then pulled a stack of papers from his backpack. He had been making posters. Dog lost. Little white poodle, etc. Come, he said to me. Come, Lilian. I know it's hard, but let's do this for Reese. Follow me. I went to follow him, thinking to myself how hard he was. He was torturing me. Couldn't he see that my little dog had gone for good? We went as he put up posters. And when we reached the end of the second street, he looked at me. I have one left. Do you see that big tree over there? It's right in front of a pub. Let's go and put it there. It's so busy, people will see it. I shrugged. But as we went to put up the poster, we realized there was one already there that said, dog found, little white poodle. And the world suddenly opened up for me again. We had found him. That night, John came to the house again, though, this time to give me a lesson. Lilian, you have to realize that as you grow up, you're going to have more days like this, tough days, when things seem impossible. But you should go for it anyway. Don't give up. Never quit. And if you think about quitting, I want you to come back to today. Think of me and think of these two magic words. Remember Reese. So you'll get strength from what happened today. You have to fight. Years went by, and unfortunately, I just forgot those words. Both Reese and John passed away, and I was making my life until a friend of mine came and invited me to a meeting she had. I went to see, and it was so strange because I realized that instead of partying as it was a Friday night, people were just sitting around waiting to give speeches. It was weird, wasn't it? I went from being shocked to being confused to being intrigued and finally amazed and even a little envious of the fellowship of these people and how they could do it, standing up in public to speak. I couldn't do it. So I walked away that night, feeling wow, but I knew I wasn't going to go back. Too difficult. And then the president rang and invited me. I was ready to say, no, I'm not coming back, when the magic words came into my mind, out of the blue, remember this. So I went. And then I found out I had to give this thing called an icebreaker. And I panicked again. I was ready to walk out the door. Remember Reese. So I didn't give up. I gave that speech. And they invited me to be on the committee. Again, I was hesitating. Remember Reese. And so on, until I started really feeling part of that club. And one day I was able to stand up and say, fellow Toastmasters, I'm so proud to be a member of this club. It has done so much for me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, remember Reese, those magic words pushed me forward to my goal. So I ask you now, what are your magic words? And do you use them enough? Madame Contest Chair.
Yes, we can hear you now. Did you see the timer?
Yes, ma'am.
Lisa Marie Graus. Lisa Marie Graus.
Lilian Shaftacola. Remember Reese. If there's one thing I can say about your speech, Lilian, it is emotional involvement. You told us a beautiful story with a happy ending, I'm glad to say. I was a little worried there for a while, but that's good because you kept me on pins and needles until we found out what was going to happen to Reese. I'd like to look at your emotional involvement from 3 different points of view in looking at your speech. The first is language, the second is your delivery, and the third is your structure. I'll only have time to say a few things, but fortunately, you are an expert speaker, and I don't have too many things to say about your speech today, except that I loved it. So let's start with the language. Your language was beautiful. You used so many different proverbs and like a needle in a haystack and dead like a zombie and things that made us drew up images of the things that you were saying so that we felt that we were involved in your very emotional story. And so your language and the words that you used were excellent choices to help us along in your emotional involvement. The second thing I wanted to look at from your speech and how it relates to emotional involvement is your delivery. And of course, we loved listening to you. You are a natural born storyteller. But there are a few little things that you could do, Lilian, that could make it even better. And one of them, I know it's hard, we're in a remote situation, is to get a little bit of movement into your speech so that we can use the camera and tell people you were so sad when you were 12 and so on. Use the camera to your advantage to make that emotional involvement even better. I've saved a little bit of space in my evaluation to talk to you about structure. Now, for everyone who's listening, Lilian told us a story. So this could be seen as a very good example of storytelling, which means she starts out with something normal. You're 12 years old and you're sitting at a dinner table and so on. And then something happens. The problem that I saw with your structure, which I think you could improve on, is that you tried to say too many things after the story. So your story about Reese and not giving up is a beautiful story. It carries on its own. When you started talking about Toastmasters, I think you got a little bit too much into detail and we lost the beautiful emotional involvement that we had felt up to that point. The energy sort of floated away. So there you go. Beautiful emotional involvement. Delivery, language, structure. A little bit of tweaks, it'll be even better. Contest chair?
Now ready for the second contestant. Our second contestant is Lisa Marie Gelhaus. Lisa Marie Gelhaus, then something happened. Then something happened, Lisa Marie Gelhaus.
If there is one thing that my mother drilled into my head when I was a teenager, it was, be prepared. And she often quoted Ben Franklin, even though I found out later he didn't really say this. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And contest chair, fellow Toastmasters, I did not want to fail, so plan I did. After high school, I imagined a brilliant academic career. And I know it's a little old-fashioned, but I also planned to find my dream man. And sure enough, 2 weeks into my university career, I found him, Patrick. Well, he was kind of like my dream man. Instead of being tall, dark, and handsome, he was short, pale, and adorable. I fell madly in love with him. So you see, my plan was taking shape around a real human being. But then something happened. Unexpectedly, Patrick disappeared. No phone calls, no emails, no nothing. My 19-year-old self was devastated. What had I done? What would be of my plan? Now I needed a new plan. Fast forward a few years, I'm now a young marketing manager, and I'm on a plane on the way back to Italy after a job. And 2 seats over from me in the plane is seated a Latin lover. Now, I'm looking for my ideal mate. That's my new plan. And Italians on airplanes, not ideal mates. So I buried myself in my book. But he kept talking to me. He told me his whole life story. And then, my name is Alessandro. Listen, you're going to Italy. Maybe you can speak a little bit of Italian. Come on, why don't you speak a little bit of Italian? I promise I won't laugh. I looked him straight in the eye and I said, senti, io faccio comunicazioni per vivere. Se non sapessi parlare italiano, morirei di fame. Basically, I said, buzz off. Two full minutes later, he slid back to his chair like a dog with a tail between his legs, and I went back to my book. But then something happened. My parents have made homemade tortellini. Would you like to come over for dinner tonight? Can you resist homemade tortellini? To make a long story short, I married the guy and boom, another plan out the window. After these and many other plans that went exactly the opposite of what I was expecting, I began to wonder, why is it that I keep making plans? And why is it that when they don't go the way I want, I get so upset? Now, this is the part of the story where a wise old grandmother, or maybe a Zen master, comes and tells a really funny story about how I spent half of my life trying to stick people into my plans. But I didn't have a mentor like that. So I read a lot. And I discovered some things that might help you too when your plans go differently than you expect. First, let me say this. It's okay to freak out a little bit. You see, our brains love order. And so we make plans because it gives us a feeling of control. And when those plans don't go the way we expect, we feel disoriented. That's normal. The problem is that a lot of times our plans collide with the plans of other people. Yeah, they have plans. And when that happens, we discover that we can't change that. We're going to have to adapt ourselves. So that's what I did. I learned how to be adaptable, to take life as it comes, to welcome, enjoy change. And I began to realize that it helped a lot to look back at the times when, at the times when change brought about things that I didn't expect at all when I was planning. So does anybody want to know what happened to the men I loved? Patrick and I reconnected after we graduated. And as adults, he could explain to me that he had come out of the closet. I didn't see that coming. But to this day, Patrick is my oldest and my dearest friend. Alessandro, that marriage lasted 15 years. And we never learned how to make our own tortellini. You see, your plans will change. And what I want to say to you is that when something happens, don't worry. Because as the song says, if things change, everything works out in the end. Everything works out in the end. Contest chair.
Chief Judge, how are they doing? Just let me know when I can proceed. Awesome. So let's move on to our second speaker. Lisa, if you want to do a test, just so we can hear you. So everything's going
Can you
well.
hear me?
Try
Hello?
again.
Test 1, 2, 1, 2 test.
Yeah, hear you perfectly.
Great.
So let's move on. So Lisa Marie Gelhaus, shortcut to success. Shortcut to success. Lisa Marie Gelhaus.
I am a busy woman. I am so busy, I don't even have time to remember that I'm busy. I am so busy that my to-do list resigned. So you can imagine that I would do anything to save time. And fortunately, I found the perfect solution. I take shortcuts. It all started a few years ago in a supermarket. I was at the back of the line, all the way back there, and I didn't have time to wait for all of those, so I very subtly just pushed myself up to the front of the line. Permesso, permesso, excuse me, permesso. And I plopped all of my goods right down on the counter. I paid for my goods. You know, those people, I think they're still back there somewhere. Fools. As I walked out of the supermarket with my little plastic bag, I noticed on my watch that I had saved an entire 6 minutes. That was an important lesson to me. I would be taking shortcuts from now on. A few years later, I needed a new job, and I didn't have time to go around having to go through all those interviews and the hiring and everything. So I went down to the headquarters of UniCredit, a very big bank, and I just announced to the receptionist that I was the new IT director. I don't know anything about IT, but it sounded pretty good. The receptionist was a little confused, and so she gave me a little badge and she showed me where my office was. I saved myself weeks of all of that boring interviewing and hiring, not to mention the years of university that I skipped. Pretty smart, huh? This shortcut thing was working very well, I thought. It was worth it for me. Maybe, as long as it works out for me, maybe it would work out for the world as well. I didn't want to keep all of this brilliance just to myself. Now, I have a question for you. What do you think is the world's most pressing problem? What did you say? Coronavirus? Nah, it's not coronavirus. Italia's Got Talent. Great show, right? We need an international version. You know what we need? We need a superstar talent that's international. So I went down to Mediaset and I offered my precious services to organize an international talent extravaganza. They hired me on the spot. Problem is, it was a lot of work to organize that stuff. So I decided to do a little shortcut, just a little one. So I called everybody into the studio and I said, now we're going to have a contest with one contestant, me. Except then something weird happened. A bunch of big bouncers came and they dragged me out of the studio. They kicked me out the door, and then they threw my plastic bag of groceries at me, and they threw a broken laptop. It hit me in the head. So here I am in the hospital, a busted skull. And I think back to my supermarket line jumping days and my spectacular IT career and those happy days that I had in the show business. And now I'm wondering, how can I rush this? Contest chair?